Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on cross-border initiatives in the South Caucasus. My name is Christina. I am a member of Caucasus Edition's editorial board. And today I will be moderating our discussion. I am glad to be joined by the co-founders and co-organizers of 3 cross-border initiatives, Leo Naslanov and Togrul Abbasov from Caucasus Talks, Leila Azimova and Lilit Bagdasaran from Caucasus Crossroad, which is better known by its Russian name, Kavказский перекресток, and Rauf Mamadov and Arnold Alavevdan from Bright Garden Voices. Thank you a lot for joining us today. But before moving forward, I want to say that it's an interesting coincidence that this month's discussion is on cross-border initiatives, which signifies for us the importance of making the effort to hear each other out and envision a common future for our region together. And unfortunately, several days ago, on October 15, we received the saddening news about the death of one of the most prominent human rights and peace activists, Georgi Vanyan, and we just want to acknowledge the important work he did and dedicate this discussion to his memory. As you might know, Caucasus Edition itself is based on cross-border cooperation of researchers, activists, and practitioners and policymakers from the region. So today, that's why today I'm not alone. I'm with my colleague Sevil Husseinova. And before moving forward, to ask you everyone to make introductions and tell about your initiatives, I want to give the floor to Sevil, please, to greet everyone and say a couple of words.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for the introduction, and I welcome all our guests today. Thank you for joining us. As Christina has already mentioned, Imagine Center for Conflict Transformation began as an Armenian Azerbaijani dialogue project in 2007 in the US, but now it's regional as well as transnational network. Involving also Georgian, Turkish, and Russian colleagues. Apart from dialogues and projects on conflict transformation, we also launch the online journal Caucasus Edition, and I am a co-editor of this journal. At that time, actually, I joined Imagine Center for Conflict Transformation in 2012. And at that time, it was the only organization of its kind. And I am very glad that today there are various cross-border peace initiatives in different formats about which we will learn today more. So I'm looking forward to interesting discussion today. Thank you again, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sevil. So now let's move forward with introductions. I will ask you to introduce your initiatives and what do you do, what are your activities, and how you have started your initiative. Bright Garden Voices, Rauf, Arnold, will you go first and tell us a bit more about your initiative?
Sure. Thank you, Christina. Hello, everybody. I am Arnold. I am a graduate student studying history in the United States, and I am one of the co-founders of Bright Garden Voices, which is a dialogue initiatives between Armenians and Azerbaijanis more broadly. So, as we know, there was this really brutal, really bloody war. 1 year ago it started, and in many ways, you know, this the violence and the animosity, the antagonism spread through you know, various on various fronts, on various platforms, including, neighborhoods across the world, and of course in this age of mass information and technology on social media. So social media became this toxic environment of all these slurs and attacks and abuse, harassment, even some misleading or fake information, people trying to belittle the other side, Armenians and Azerbaijanis, saying even like you don't belong in the region, and things about cultural heritage. So, and there were also some reasonable voices here and there, but this would be in general silenced, isolated. They would be attacked, and trolls would be doing what they do. And it was very it was not a pleasant environment to be online, to try to interact with people in general, and especially on the other side. So myself, so Diego Arduan, who is who studies geography in Argentina, a geographer, Aidan Gasimova, an Azerbaijani at the time, and myself, and we had been talking with each other among a wider group, decided to maybe do something to give space to these voices. So we had something very small in mind, just a platform for some of these voices that we see online, especially on Twitter, that's where we met, would have a space to express themselves without any interruptions. And so what we decided was that we would be holding some meetings over Zoom. And of course, during the pandemic, people became more tech friendly, started using these programs more, such as Zoom. So we wanted for people to see real faces and real voices of people having a discussion in a civil manner, holding dialogue in a civil manner, and in hopes of that this would sort of nurture more understanding, humanize each side to the other. And we wanted them to mostly also register real voices and real faces of people who were doing so, which is pretty much lacking across social media. So for them to register visual and auditory references of people on the other side that have this other image, not necessarily nasty and antagonistic, but civil, respectful, etc. And our original aim was mainly to bring ordinary people and have them talk to each other. But of course, we found it useful to widen the net to academics, activists, even what we call experts in the region or on the about the conflict. And so yes, so we started hosting Zoom meetings, and we would have a topic for each meeting. We would find 2 or 4 people, mainly Armenians and Azerbaijanis, and we would have a discussion with them on certain things in this topic, and then we would open the floor for the audience to interact with the guests and ask questions themselves, make their faces seen, their voices heard, etc., etc. And the topics we started covering have been ranging from things like refugees and IDPs to people of mixed ancestry or gender, and it probably, I can say maybe that not the topics so much themselves sometimes, even though there's a lot of interesting discussions there, but also just the process of coming together and discussing and producing examples for people to see of communication between the two sides. I think that's just as important, if not more important, than the topics that are discussed. So for a long time, for many months, most of the past year, I would say maybe 7-8 months that we've been active, we've been doing that. But recently we started with new kinds of projects. One of them garden chats, which are one-on-one interviews on Instagram Live. Another one is what we call a tet, an Azerbaijani with an Armenian there, which is tet-a-tet, playful version of it. These are also in-person interviews, but in person, so not online, recorded on a camera, which apparently people enjoy more for some reason. I think partly because of pandemic fatigue. And we're also thinking about new projects, new ways of bringing people together, expanding, on social media to reach new generations. I can elaborate about this more later on. Even thinking about, I don't know, TikTok, gaming, etc., Soviet stuff for older generations. And most of our discussions have been in English so far. We've started some Russian, but we also hope to do meetings solely in Armenian or Azerbaijani also. And we hope to ideally translate all of these in all these languages, but it is hard to do so. The human resources, time, etc. It takes a lot of work to translate. We only have a couple of our larger meetings translated. And so that is pretty much it for where we are right now. And we think that such initiatives are important because sometimes, first of all, we have this resource, social media and these online platforms, to do something like this, which wasn't really there, say, 20 years ago. Even 10 years ago, it wasn't as good. And that especially for the Armenian and Azerbaijani conflict and relation, it feels a huge gap left there, with minimal to no communication, contact between peoples on each side. And, for the past 3 decades, and wars and violence in between, we think, even for later political change and changes in attitudes, we think that this is a necessary steps for people on this level, on the grassroots level, to to change their perception and help them in this manner. And we believe even if we reach out to one individual, our effect reaches to a few people, then we're still happy. We think that's good, that's progress, that's something done, and we hope that this will, and they interact with other people, so we hope that if you have a positive influence, it would just spread with individuals in that manner. So that is it.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I follow you on different platforms, and that's really interesting how you make use of all tools on social media, and actually social media platforms give that opportunity to reach out to wider audience, and that's kind of the biggest advantage of it. But on the other hand, as you mentioned as well, Arnold, social media can also be very toxic. And especially when it comes to controversial topics, you can be exposed to hate speech and threats and kind of very aggressive reactions. And I'm sure, and I guess that you also have received that throughout this time. And I want to ask you, how do you deal with that? What do you do with that kind of reactions, but also kind of how do you rationalize it and analyze where is this coming from? And do you think about, okay, so there is so much negative reactions, how shall we make what we do more understandable for wider audience, especially when you make an explicit decision to be as public as possible, doing lives and using all different platforms that you do. Yeah, so Rauf, maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, my usual reaction is to ignore and to concentrate on more constructive approach. Because as Arnold described it, our idea is to, first of all, to create a communication platform. I think it came from the acknowledgement that Azerbaijanis, Armenians, especially the younger generations, haven't really talked and haven't really interacted. They did have platforms to do so, such as Twitter or other social media websites and apps, but there was only shouting and accusations, but not really communication. And we believe that there were reasonable voices that really want to talk, want to share their ideas. And that's what we concentrate on. So it was, it's acknowledgement of this bleak reality that there is not really proper knowledge of each other. And then there is not really talking going on. And so we really focus on people who prefer to talk and who prefer to communicate in a frame that Arnold listed within the value system, which is not that much, just the respect and understanding and empathy. So this is what we focus on, and we know that we are, as we had discussions before the live started, we're unfortunately marginal groups. We understand that, because some people who usually call us naives and who think that we are just, looking in the world with the pink colors and through the prism of everything is perfect, and we should be. Now that's the ultimate goal, but right now we're just working on people to talk, and so we usually communicate, but we understand that there's a toxic load there. There's unfortunately there's a lot of hatred, which elevated in pre-war and during war and the post-war time. We understand that, but we still believe that there should be communication.
Thank you. Arnold, do you want to add something? I saw your message.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that in the very beginning, the project got a lot of attention and a lot of backlash. So a lot of angry reactions, and this was just 2 months after the ceasefire, and especially a lot of the Armenians were angry. So yeah, especially a lot of online harassment, very angry messages I was sent. But for me it was natural. I think it was expected. I interpret this as just angry reactions to understandably the war and trauma, etc. But the thing is, though, some of these same people, well, some of them are just trolls on internet, but some of the people also reached out to us later and actually follow us now. Like after seeing, especially we used peace early on, and people had allergic reactions apparently to it. So we talk about dialogue, humanization, and bridge building. So words that are more, I guess, digestible.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Should we move forward? Lilith, could you please tell us about Caucasus Crossroad or Кавказский перекресток?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Leila, and I will let Lilit introduce herself later when she continues. So I am from Azerbaijan, born and bred, and I currently live in London, United Kingdom, where I work in the energy industry. So our initiative, basically, well, first of all, both of us, Lilit and myself, we are part of the moderator team of the Facebook group, but we are not the founders or the creators. So someone else created the group. A couple of Armenian and Azerbaijanis just met online on Facebook and thought of creating such an initiative. I think you might have met Rosa on one of the Bright Garden events. She spoke on one of them, so she is one of the founders. And then we have a rather big team of moderators from both sides. We try to keep an equal number of Azeri and Armenian moderators just for the sake of objectivity, etc. So our group, it's essentially a Facebook group. As you mentioned, it's called Кавказский перекресток or Caucasus Crossroad. And well, it's primarily in Russian, but anyone can write in English as well if they prefer to. And we have a few English speaking users in the group who do write in English, and they just make use of the Facebook Translate tool to understand everything else that's being written. So it's essentially a group about us, about everything. So it's a place where Armenian and Azerbaijani people can discuss a very wide kind of array of topics, from very serious, even sensitive ones, which we try to watch very closely, to silly and fun things. So pretty much everything. We share music, food recipes, etc., etc. And of course, that takes some serious moderation. So it's something we do every day. It's essentially a second job, except that it's done on a purely volunteer basis. So no one gets paid for this. So I would say it's a great job by the whole team. And we think it's a very important initiative. And I will pass on to Lilit to talk about the importance of the group further. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Lilit. I am from Armenia. I grew up there, but currently I'm living in Czech Republic, working in the hotel. So I was like just a simple person who, especially during the war, wanted to find people who think the same way. So that's how I end up in the group and then joined the moderation team. So I will speak a little bit about the importance of the group, which we think is, as already mentioned here, I think Raouf was speaking about it, that mostly young generation from both sides, they never actually communicate with each other. And that's the problem, because it was helping propaganda to build this enemy view, this dehumanization, the other side. So I think it's important of the group is that people can communicate with each other and just get to know each other from the start. And we believe that it can help see some stereotypes and myths which are actually not true about each other, and just simply get to know each other. And we are encouraging people to show to each other empathy, to build trust, that there will be more kindness to each other, and we encourage people to listen to each other, to share their stories, to see the other view on the conflict, to try to just understand and maybe discuss and maybe come to some agreement. So, and it's also, of course, in respectful way, not just toxic as it is in internet. So that's why we are also having these rules and trying to be showing people that there is a respectful way of communication. So I think that's all from my side.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Leila. I saw the message that my connection might be bad. Can you hear me well now?
Yes, at the moment, yes.
Okay, yeah, hopefully it won't be interrupted. Sorry about that. So yeah, I just want to say that Caucasus Crossroad is probably the only platform on Facebook that I check regularly, and most importantly read the comments section, which usually I just don't, and I find some fascinating discussions evolving there. And especially when you realize those are people that do not really have any peace building or, I don't know, conflict or political science related background, and they are so engaged and respectful, and kind of, yeah, developed as meaningful conversations. And what is also interesting to watch, kind of observe how there is this conflict prevention happening by the participants themselves when there is someone aggressive, and then people try to turn the conversation down and bring it back to a constructive place. And a question I have to you as moderators, because you follow these conversations closely, I wonder if you have observed any changes of perception among certain people when you see someone kind of joining the group with more of an aggressive attitude, not really ready to listen and, you know, be open to alternative opinions, and then you see kind of the transformative power of your platform. Do you have any cases in mind like this?
Definitely, we do have cases. So first of all, you mentioned the comments and the commenters, and we have to say that we have seen examples of users of our group kind of self-moderating. So trying, as you mentioned, to direct the conversation in a more peaceful manner. So there is that, but also we have seen transformations in I would say the behavior or the discourse by some of the users, which definitely kind of started to communicate more respectfully elsewhere as well, because sometimes you see news pop up and comments under them. So sometimes you would see that someone who used to be more aggressive now almost unconsciously follows the rule of our group outside the group as well, when they write about basically when the comment on the news about any Armenian Azerbaijani issues. And even we had a funny story when someone told us that thanks to our group, they have changed perception towards gay people, which was kind of an unintended consequence, because it's not that our group is specifically focused on discussing gay people, so it's clearly dedicated to Armenian Azerbaijani relations. But I guess it's just the effect of us encouraging people to respect and show empathy towards others. So that's how it expands to other people as well.
Thank you. And finally, Leon Tovrul, could you please tell about Caucasus Talks?
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone. I'll speak mainly, and then Togru will conclude at the end. So my name is Leon Aslanov, and I started with my friends this initiative, Caucasus Talks, about a year ago, but this was before the war and also before the July clashes. And it's a bit different from the other one. We're not a Armenian Azerbaijani platform. We're a more general platform, and we include everyone from Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and also the surrounding countries as well. And our main sort of direction is not exactly conflict resolution or conflict dialogue, but we have a more broader focus. So we focus more on common issues that are not directly related or relevant to your ethnic or your national identity. So it's general issues such as the environment or workers' rights or gender issues or xenophobia. And all of these issues and others, we want to sort of present them as related to one another. They're not separate issues that we need to fight on different lines. We see them as a whole, a holistic vision. And the kind of logic behind what we're doing is that we want to fight for improvements on all of these fronts together to create, let's say, a more healthy society in the South Caucasus and the broader region. And these more healthy societies would consequently, they would exhibit less violence. So not just direct violence in terms of hitting or killing, but also less structural violence in these societies. This would then, we think, would lead to a byproduct, which would lead to less need for violent conflict between groups. And peace would then be a byproduct of that. We believe that basically a society without violence within itself is really unlikely to commit violence against another society. And the opposite is true of that. If you are a violent society, you are more likely to commit violence against another society. So for now, we have been organizing discussions online on a range of topics, as I mentioned before. And we hope to expand these discussions to a broader range of scholars, activists from the region, to start normalizing these discussions in the public sphere, just like the other initiatives today. Because many of these discussions have been either non-existent or they've been stigmatized. And also, we don't want it just to be a cross-border thing, but we want it to also be across disciplines, across fields. So generally in, let's say, the academic world, there's really strict categorization of issues, individualization of issues. And this leads to a kind of reduction in solidarity between people, interdependence between people, mutual aid between people. And this is why you have, separate NGOs that do work on specific issues. You've got conflict resolution NGO doing its own work. You've got women's rights NGOs doing their own work. Our vision is, as I said, more holistic in terms of bringing these together, the people who work on these issues together, and show how they are interrelated. Also, politically speaking, we have a kind of critical eye on the establishment of these nation states, of Georgia Republic, Armenian Republic, Azerbaijani Republic, and the kind of journey that they have taken from more than 100 years ago until today. All these republics, they were formed on the lines of ethnic nationalism. And this is a violent process that happened at that time, and it's a violent process that continues up till today. It's a process where you homogenize society, you all belong to this republic under this titular nation, and it also centralizes power, obviously mainly in the capital cities of these countries. And so you have this idea that each of these countries has a majority culture. This can be not just the ethnic majority culture, but also a class elite majority culture. And you have minorities who kind of fight to keep their own cultures, not just ethnic again, but also their class cultures. So the problem is that people submit to these central authorities, and this was also the case in the Soviet Union. You had to listen to what Moscow says. What Moscow says, you do. Now you live in Republic of Armenia, what Yerevan says, you do. We want to start a war, then you have to go to the army. Baku says we want to start a war, you have to go. Tbilisi, whatever it says, you have to follow. And we want to make this picture more complicated. We want to critique what this is. One quite simple example of this is how people imagine shared interests. So people who live in the same republic believe that they all share interests together. But the reality is quite different. If you take, for example, border villages between Armenia and Azerbaijan, they have the same geography. They have familiar memories from the past of encounters, familiar modes of communication, exchange, and trade. They know each other well. They know each other better than Yerevan knows someone from the border village, or Baku knows someone from the border village. They share more interests together than they do with Yerevan or with Baku. So why should they have to give up their interests for the interests of the central government? This is something we want to critique in what we do. And this is not just a South Caucasian issue, this is a global issue. It's how globalization is working, it's how the organization of nation states are working throughout the world. And I just want to mention one real challenge that all of our initiatives would have, not just Caucasus Talks, but everyone else, is that people don't have time, people don't have energy to deal with these issues from a critical perspective. They want to just say what they've heard and their identity is connected to that. It's much easier. So the education systems have been highly propagandistic, very one-sided. Economies in these regions, so much poverty, high level of frustration. People can't spend time thinking about these things. And when the state needs you to commit violence, it's easy to mobilize people. They have, let's say, nothing much to fight for in their daily lives. So it's easy to mobilize these kinds of citizens. Why? Because they feel they are contributing to something bigger than themselves. They're contributing to society because they are fighting for them. But ultimately, they are contributing to their own central governments, basically their own nation states. So if you want to convince them to be involved in peace building, it means you have to ask them to reject that identification with their state, to reject the kind of self-worth that they have developed in themselves and agency in themselves that they've related to their nation state and their central governments. So anyone who doesn't do that is perceived as a traitor, someone who has committed betrayal. So what we as initiatives have to think of is how to convince people that they are benefiting from these peace building activities as people in themselves, how they can satisfy their own feelings of self-worth and to reject the propaganda that they've been brought up on. Most of the people who have engaged in dialogue up till now have been in a nationalist framework. They want to serve their own national interests. This is really problematic. We don't want to engage in this kind of dialogue. People in the war, they were thinking it's our defeat, it's our victory. They are imagining themselves in this community as if it's a football match. But it's not enough to just talk. Okay, we're all talking, it's good, but we have to imagine, what are we talking about? Not just blaming each other and letting out some stress. It's important what you talk about. It's important to talk about what political economic system is our dialogue taking us towards. What alternative systems can we imagine? Our dialogue is about how to change this system, ideology. There are several options. Do we move towards civic nationalism? Do we move towards North European style social democracies, decentralized socialist practices? Do we want regionalism? Let's talk about these things. That's why our discussions, we try to direct in particular directions. And I'd like Toglu to just conclude what we do as well.
Oh. Thank you, Leon. I'm Toglu Abbasov. I'm living in Baku. I'm a member of the Caucasus Talks. Let me introduce myself shortly. The critical eye is very important for us, as Leon mentioned. But I think here I want to add that this criticism also should be the self-criticism, not only the criticism of the other side or the global issues. Also, self-criticism is very important for the peacemaking initiatives, we think. Because without self-criticism, we can only make, let me say, a kind of pseudo-dialogues or so-called tolerances, etc., to each other. And if there would be the self-criticism, then we will talk about peace loudly, but inside we will continue feeling that we, our nation, are absolute innocents, victims, etc. Which means we will feel that we don't have any responsibility in this conflict. And this was what most people have done before war at last 30s. Most of these peacemaking initiatives worked like that, without self-criticism. And as we witnessed last year in the first ballot, as the war started, most of these people stand by their state, not by the peace. And it was very disappointing for all of us. So, you know, being absolutely innocent is impossible. It is it's a kind of feeling of the narcissism. And being absolutely innocent can be okay only for babies, but for adults and for mature peoples, it's a kind of disorder. So being an adult and a mature means to feel responsibility for our own acts, our family's acts, our people's acts, and our state's acts. And to be able to criticize all of this means being people, being adult people, to feeling responsibility. So without feeling this responsibility for our crimes, let me say, and without self-criticism, we can only be diplomats of the state that talking about peace, but it is not the way of the peacemaking, and we can't be peacemakers without self-criticism. I want to, and it's important, our platform and initiative.
Thank you very much for your insightful introduction. And I want to say that I'm also happy to be part of Caucasus Talks. And I remember how it started during the, I think it was an outcome of the COVID, the first wave of pandemic and the first lockdown when it all started. And I remember that our first conversations were about, as Leon presented, focusing on different issues that are common among our societies because of the specific historical trajectories, and to change our focus from the kind of conflict isolated from all other problems to that different diverse problems that we have. But during the Second Karabakh War, Caucasus Talks was also the first to design an anti-war statement, and many joined, and it was vocal about that. So I want to ask you about kind of that decision, how that decision was made. I want you to tell about that. And what do you think about the peace movement in general in the region? Is it becoming more active after the Second Karabakh War, or it became more fragmented? Or yeah, what are your observations also as a team that was part of that kind of organizing the peace statements and, you know, being vocal about that?
So when the clashes were happening and we were thinking about releasing statement, obviously we realized we are a small initiative that just started online. We're not going to have any policy impact. We're not going to change the direction of the state, and we're not going to influence geopolitics in the region. But we wanted to know to what extent people from there are really interested in cutting down violence, are really interested in talking about compromises. And we found that there were thousands of people. And this is from from us just starting just for a month, very small initiative, and we would just put out this statement, very short, and we found a lot of big responses. And this was not just from ordinary people or young people, this was also from fairly famous figures, not just from the region, also for example from Turkey we had Garo Paylan as well, who signed it, and a number of fairly famous activists from the whole region. And unfortunately some of them were exposed to risk. This was especially the case in Azerbaijan. People had security risks. Some of them wanted to take their names off and didn't want to include it. But most people stuck to their decision and wanted to show solidarity with this. In terms of the general peace movements in the region, obviously we are all still very small. People don't see peace through the lens of self-criticism, as Togru mentioned before. People feel that when they engage in dialogue, they have to represent the position of their state. They have to represent the discourse that is produced in their state and in the media of their state. They also kind of relate themselves to political events. If there is a massacre or something happening committed by soldiers, or a decision by generals or political leadership, then you feel that you are also part of this, and you have to justify this yourself as an individual. But we want to show that this is not, you don't have to identify yourself with the actions of your state or the discourse in the media. You can have different positions on each issue. If there is a pogrom, if there is a massacre, you don't have to defend it yourself. You don't have to identify with it. I think this is something that we want to develop in the minds of people, that they can have their own opinions on specific issues.
Thank you a lot for your introductions, guys. And I want to encourage our audience to submit questions to us in the Q&A section to our speakers, and we will, I believe, have time to take a couple of questions. I have one question to you all, so whoever wants can answer to it, and I want to try to challenge you a bit here by asking, after the Second Karabakh War, I think there is a strong opinion or a discourse that peace-building community and peace-building activities in general failed, and the Second Karabakh War is kind of the symbol of that failure, that this didn't work out and none of the activities done succeeded. My first question is, what do you think about that argument? Do you agree or not? But the second is still cross-border initiatives and the work you do and we do together seems like a drop in the ocean, as most of you mentioned, in kind of the mainstream prevalent nationalist discourses. But still you make that decision to engage in such work and put your efforts and energy and time into your initiatives and still find it important. So I want to ask you, and of course some of you already kind of partially answered to this question, but still I want to ask you, what makes you kind of every day engage in this work and, you know, organize and put this efforts? What is, you know, what is the importance? What's the point of doing this work? Yeah, who wants to answer first?
I can start if you'd like, or
sure.
I'll keep it short, give other people time. So I mean, I have the belief that people in the region, they all want the same thing, or let's say 90 to 95% of people there, they want the same thing, and they all say that they want the same thing. They say, oh, we want peace. They don't want peace. we are doing everything for peace, but they are not compromising. They generally do want the same thing, they just don't see the channel through which they can get there. And they think that the other side is stopping them from getting to that position. So I think the aims of our initiatives are that we're showing that the picture is more complicated than you might imagine. We are showing that maybe what you hear from your own media or your own state is not the one view that exists out there. And that if you sort of bring all these views and perspectives together and different experiences, different parts of the country, different ages, different age groups, different educational backgrounds, you will see that it is very difficult and a difficult journey to get to that end point of peace. It's not easy just to say we want peace and they don't want peace. I think to bring more and more people on board, we need to do more of this bringing from both sides of the society and to show more and more perspectives as much as possible. I think that will then make that journey a bit easier to get to towards the end and to show that it's not so black and white.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I can add a little bit. It's hard for me to speak about the peace initiatives before, because before this last war, I didn't know about them much. So I don't know if they fail or maybe government in both countries make the effort to not succeed. And I think I have a hope. That's what's keeping me in doing what I'm doing. But like, to be honest, this last time I was a little bit also exhausted from constantly reading the comments and seeing how some people don't want to see or show some empathy. And then when I was today, I was listening to this interview with Mili and Alexei Romanov about Georgy Vanyan and how they were remembering his road and that how government was scaring people in Armenia. So I start to believe that maybe people really want peace, but they're scared, and we just need to try to encourage them and to speak out loud. And when they will see, like, because everybody's silent in the society, people see that nobody speaks, so they also don't afraid to make this first step. And maybe by making this step, we will kind of show them that it's nothing scared to say your opinion and to say that you're against the violence.
Thank you, Lilith. Rauf or Arnold, do you want to add something?
I can go, Rauf, unless you want to say something.
Go ahead.
So I was not involved in any way or shape or form before the Second War in any peace building, bridge building initiative, but I wouldn't interpret it as a failure because, first of all, a lot of the voices we hear now about bridge building, etc., are the people who were involved, who had friends from these initiatives before the Second War, and even during the war, a lot of these people called for example, no war, etc. So they had this alternative message to people. So for me, it's not fair for initiatives like this to be branded as failure, because eventually sort of the political class fails and there is a war that happens. Even during war, it's better to have a dehumanized enemy, even during the worst wars. So yeah, so that's my take on it. Rauf, do you have?
Yeah, if you're asking what drives me to do this, is probably the absurdness of the situation, the ignorance on both sides about one another, and lack of self-criticism, as it was mentioned by us, Leon and Toru. What motivates me is to, I believe that for the self-criticism, there should be also one of the integral element of it is also to understanding the other side as well. The empathy is part of it as well. And in order to understand, there needs to be communication. One way of it is the communication. So that's my functional role as part of this wonderful team, to create that form of information exchange, and then, you know, to broaden it to be as comprehensive as possible, to bring people from different backgrounds, not necessarily related to the peace building, but also just, you know, presenting them to both nations. So that's my motivation, and that's what makes me, you know, happy to do.
Thank you, Toru. Leila, do you have anything?
Yes, I want to. Yes, I think it initiatives before war partly, I think, was unsuccessful, but it doesn't mean that they unsucceed because of the people don't want a peace. I think it is some responsibility is come from the states. They didn't actually. I don't think that they wanted to be a real peace initiatives. Also, I think we have to criticize also the corrupted NGO system in these initiatives, because there are a lot of people, as I mentioned before, in first ballot, they started to stand by their state. And unfortunately, most of them I know before, for example, I know that they were in these initiatives because of some, let me say, some personal interests for themselves, for not really peace. So this, I think, if we are talking about what can we do after this point, I think both these initiatives, like here, France, also the other NGOs, etc., should be aware of these unsuccess, this corrupted system. Are these people really doing something, or they just, let me say, doing pseudo something? For example, self-criticism, I talk about it. There wasn't, I haven't seen any self-criticism in that initiative. As Leon mentioned, most of the people presenting feeling that they present their state, etc. Yes, okay, I can listen to you, but I am right. At the end, I am right. And this is I think, the main problem of such initiatives, and we should be aware of this, and we should be think about it a lot. It's a big issue, I think. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Leila, do you have anything to add?
I don't have much to add because, as Lilith mentioned, I also wasn't aware of those initiatives prior to the war, and as I honestly wasn't too interested in the topic at all. And in fact, from our group's perspective, it was only created after the war. So in a way, it's the war that's enabled those people in the group to get together and start talking to each other. So it's hard to say that this initiative failed because I guess it stemmed from what happened last year, and it's kind of an indication of a new, how to call it, stage or a new spiral or whatever it's called, piece of spiral in this kind of peace talks. So it's something entirely new.
Thank you for your answers. And I also want to, I agree. I share the opinion that self-reflection and criticism is important. And by asking this question, that was also what I had in mind, to see what is your take on cross-border activities and how can we improve them and make them more influential. And of course, and we have one of the questions submitted. Maybe I can also kind of smoothly turn to the questions from the audience. There was one question about kind of course, cross-border work is important, but then decisions are usually made top-down still. Yeah, maybe what do you think about that? Let me just open the question. And yeah, it asks about, sorry, let me read it. So yeah, it says, how can any project succeed if it also requires the political will from the top? So yeah, it's rather a statement, but still, what do you think about that?
Well, can I go first? I think we've discussed it with Arnold yesterday when we were preparing for this meeting. We, as an organization and individually myself, I acknowledge that. I understand the importance of political will. I understand how stimulative it could be when it comes from the top, especially in patriarchic societies such as Azerbaijan and also Armenia as well, in overall in Caucasus. Yet we believe that this shouldn't be looked in like mutually exclusive perspective. The dialogue building, which is what we're doing, it's probably the subsection of the peace building or general, more holistic approach, is part of the overall the peace mechanism. But any to make it mass consumable, you know, it could have been easier when it came from top. We understand that in short term it's important, but in longer term, of course, what Leon mentioned about change of the perception, about the self-criticism, about digesting the pain that was inflicted by one side to another, understanding and their traumas, that those are the most important factors. So we look, our view is very humble. We have concrete goals. We have set, you know, we'll continue to build different kind of bridges. You know, we'll talk about the ideas if there's time. But our goal is just to you know, to create the one element of this mechanism overall, the peace mechanism, which is the communication part.
Thank you. There is another question from the audience, a very interesting one about your positioning, that some of you are outside the region, are residing outside the region, and some of you are in the region, based in Armenia or Azerbaijan. And the question is about whether it helps your positioning in general, whether it helps or prevents you from being more influential in what you do and in your activities, and becoming widely or more accepted in Armenia and Azerbaijan.
I think this is definitely a problem, and all of our initiatives, we're working online. If we're going to be serious about our aims, then eventually, maybe we are not ready at the moment in terms of capacities and things. We have to start working on the ground, and this is something that we can take inspiration from Georgi Vanyan. He was someone who was working really on the ground, and he was taking all of that abuse on himself, unfortunately. Now we see there is more of us. There is more of us, and we can take more of that. Let's say it doesn't have to be taking abuse, but we can take all of that pressure on our shoulders, and we can think of doing some things together, some projects on the ground. For example, Vanyan, we saw in recent videos, he tried to organize a Azerbaijani film festival. Why not try that again in Armenia, and try Armenian Film Festival in Azerbaijan? Some projects along those lines, where you're on the ground and you're there trying to change people's minds face to face. Hopefully in the future, near future as well, people will be able to cross the borders as well physically, and we will be able to do these things physically. I think it would be great if we have a focus on border villages and towns at the start and work with these communities from the beginning. I think we can play a role in building trust again between them, because we are, let's say, representatives of these nations. Even if we don't feel that way, they will see us like that. We can be the ones who initiate this and build that trust, especially physically, let's say, along the border. And then hopefully this can spread out more widely.
I can add something. So I am myself based in the United States, and Bright Garden Voices did start by communication on social media. And we also have to acknowledge, especially the diasporas, but especially the Armenian diaspora are the most active on social media in some platforms. So there's more people from the Armenian diaspora there. So that's important. But the thing is, Bright Garden has now expanded. We have a group of members, and many of them in the region, in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, Georgia, everywhere. And we're giving them now just more and more. They're becoming, more and more the face of the project, hosting meetings, etc., etc. So, but I do strongly agree with Leon that any significant, meaningful, major initiative needs to also involve, being on the ground with people, something as grassroots as, the initiatives of Georgi Vanyan, etc. So that is needed. And hopefully maybe I could also be involved in that one day.
Thank you. Leila, do you have anything to add?
I can.
Go ahead.
Leila can.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was thinking, well, because, for example, in the moderation, there is also people who live in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and people like me or Leila who are living in Europe. So I was also thinking that because a lot of people live also outside, it can be also possible to have a meeting, for example, somewhere in Europe, for example, that people who live there, because also nowadays it's a little bit complicated with traveling, but people can also live in Europe and who are inspired by such a peaceful initiative to meet and maybe make some statement, maybe do some activity, which can be also meaningful. I was a little bit sad during the war how some famous people, like from the side, they were, instead of speaking about peace and some peaceful regulation, they were choosing a side. Like also some famous Armenians who are living outside of Armenia. And I think it can be also important, like for example, living in meeting in Georgia, or as Leon suggested, making some festival, but it also can be meaningful, I think, to meet somewhere in America or in Europe.
Also, in the case of our initiative, I don't think that us living abroad kind of makes things different for us, because I mean, I could totally see myself still being in Baku and still doing this. So I really don't see an issue with that. And to be honest, I don't even think that I would face with a lot of disapproval or any sort of abuse in the society, because quite frankly, there is nothing to there's nothing to dislike in what we're doing, I think. I mean, some people still do, but I've talked about this initiative to many people I know, and even those who, you know, raised an eyebrow, like, why on earth would you be in such group or anything? Even they don't perceive this as something wrong or as us being traitors, or, you know. So I guess it doesn't matter whether I'm personally based in London or in Baku.
Can I say something? Just to add on Leila's comments. I just came back from Baku, where I spent 2 months, and my observation was almost the same. That yeah, people don't. When I talk about it, people do not react aggressively. They actually indifferent. Most of the people are indifferent to the peace. I mean, they want peace, but they're inactive. And I think that's as probably Leo mentioned it too, these are the people that we are actually trying to appeal to, who do not want to take any active role being violent or aggressive. These people want to be prioritize other issues rather than, you know, war with neighbor, but they do not want to do anything about it. So that was my major disappointment about this issue, rather than you know, about the being in Azerbaijan. But I know that there are challenges, of course. You know, there are some unreasonable people are trying to fight it as well, and you know, we've seen what happened. You know, what kind of pressure Banyan felt in Armenia, and I think there has been other examples in Azerbaijan as well. So we understand the burden, but we continue to do what we believe to.
Thank you. Now, before taking one more question, maybe from the.
Let me ask.
Sure.
If you have, can I add something also?
Of course, of course.
And it's also very important for us, for such independent platforms, initiatives, to make a synergy and to not be in a competition, but to complete each other. So, for example, maybe someone can be in Washington and he doesn't have any, for example, chance to organize something in Yerevan, but someone can be in Yerevan, and the people who are living in Washington can support him for his initiative, or in Baku, etc. So what done before in the false way, also there was some competition between these initiatives, because I don't think most of that NGOs are the independent. They are just making some projects, let me say. So they're trying to keep some funding from somewhere. But instead of this, supporting each other, what can, for example, Arnold do? And I can't do. I should support Arnold. What can I do? But Arnold cannot do. He is not like you. He can support me, etc. So such kind of synergies and without competition, completing each other, I think we can make further steps in positive way.
Thank you, Togrul, indeed. And one of the goals we had in mind by organizing this webinar was actually to bring us all together and to have this conversation and also get to know each other. And I really hope that after this webinar, we will keep in touch, and you as initiatives will be in touch, and maybe there will be possibilities for cooperation, because the goal is the same, but you all are doing different activities and have different ideas. And because we're short in time now, I want to ask you if you have any questions to each other that you would like to know about each other.
I think someone on the comments made a fair point that many of the panelists didn't introduce themselves or kind of tell us where they come from or what they do. So
right, it's true. I just noticed it as well. And sorry about that. I'm not following the chat closely now. But yeah, maybe, of course, some of you already introduced yourselves, but maybe now during the final rounds, just tell a bit about you. Maybe where you are right now, where are you residing, what is your kind of profession or occupation, and yeah.
I didn't introduce myself, I think, in the beginning. My name is Rauf Mammadov, and I'm the co-organizer for Bright Guiding Voices. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and my background is energy industry. I'm born and raised Azerbaijani, and I've been living in the United States for the last 10 years.
And my name is Leon Aslanov. I'm based in London, and I work mainly in research, mainly focusing on Middle East. I studied kind of Middle East studies is my main and languages is my background. And yeah, my name and surname might look confusing to some people. But my family is mainly from Armenia, and with some mixed ethnic Greek roots as well.
Thank you. Leila, you wanted to say something, or was it just that comment, or you wanted to ask a question to someone? I mean, and if not, it's
I can add a little bit about myself, but actually I don't have any background like in peacemaking. So it's working in Caucasus Crossroad is my first experience. And I study applied informatics, but I'm working in a hotel right now, but I'm interested in programming and such stuff. And I wanted to ask, I was interested in how Leon talk, and I wanted to ask Caucasus talk, like Leon or Toglu, about when they were speaking about nationalism, like in the countries, and that all these issues are connected with each other. How you encourage people, if you have experience, like how you encourage people to see the troubles which they have in their societies. It can be like, it's more interested for me about this nationalism.
It's very difficult to open up this topic with people because people's identities are so connected with the idea of the nation that they belong to, as if that is their self, that if you try to criticize or critique that idea, it feels that you're attacking them personally. But one way to approach this, especially from a nationalism, nation perspective, is that nationalism is something new. It's something modern. It's not something that always existed. It's something that developed in the 18th, 19th century. It's something connected to the Industrial Revolution, to the spread of capitalist ways of organizing the economy. It's connected to the way that international relations is organized in terms of nation states. This is not something that always existed. And I think one other way to talk about this is if people are also comfortable with the idea that identity is not fixed, identity can change, not just over the period of 100 or 200 or 1,000 years, but even in your own lifetime, your identity can change depending on your surroundings, depending on technological developments, depending on interactions with different people and cultures. If you can kind of tell people that identity is something flexible, then they can also be open to the idea that national identity is also something flexible and connected to the political context in which you live. You didn't always have a national identity in the modern sense. It's something different. Before, for example, let's say Ottoman Empire was divided along religious identity lines. This then developed into national identity lines based on that religious identity. And then in 50, 100 years, it will change again. And I mean, one day, the nation states of Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, Argentina, Japan, they will also not exist in these names. They will also change. But it's difficult to get people to see the wide thing because they live their own identity today. That's the challenge.
Let me again add something and introduce myself. I am Togla Basov, and I do researching on nationalism, national identity over visual cultural materials, especially researching on films and movies of the Caucasian cinema. Is my main research area. So this is what my foundation. What we can do, I think, it's not, as Leon said, it's not easy to people generally say that, for example, this national identity is flexible, fluidity, there is a fluidity in it, it can change, it's a modern term, etc., etc. But because there are some cultural roots of these national identities, we should be aware of this. And so in my studies, I try to deconstruct these national deconstruct these national narratives and national images, because the people do not read and change their book, all let me say all their opinions, etc., about nationalism. It can be only in the several cases can be true, but in general it's not like that, because the circumstance is different. should be done, should we do to deconstruct, to make alternative narratives to these national narratives. We can make challenge to these, let me say, official and state-based narratives, which creates nationalism. Because nationalism, nation state is not coming from the let's say emptiness. It's coming from the nationalists. So to understanding these first nationalists, how they change, transfer it to the nation state, and how then again this nation state spread this nationalism to the mass. To understand this and to deconstruct it again and again over cultural expressions, over the films, literatures, etc. I think it is can be much more effective, other than try to understand people in a didactic way that okay, you believe this, but it's not like that. But and the first important thing here, I think, it's this story. After our Caucasus Talks, the first, as I remember, first discussion was about the criticism of the nation state history narratives. Such kind of deconstructions, criticisms, of course, we don't have much more audiences, but if we can do all together and spread to people, and they maybe at least we can make a question for them, that they can think about it, and it can be continued then in this way to deconstruct again and again. It's not easy, but it can be done.
Thank you, Toru. Thank you, everyone, for your insightful contributions. And I really find this discussion important. Unfortunately, we are out of time now, but we had a question about your future plans on 2022. What are your goals and objectives as an initiative? So maybe if you could, like, one person from each group representing each initiative, just say 2 sentences about what do you imagine, what is your kind of long-term plan, a goal or an objective that you have in mind, and then we can conclude. But before concluding, because now people will start leaving us, I think I want to encourage everyone to follow Caucasus Talks, Bright Garden Voices, and Caucasus Crossroad or Кавказский перекресток on social media, to follow and get to know more about their work. And I think there they will also find more information about your current activities and your future plans. So yeah, if you want to say 1-2 sentences about your next activities and future goals, please.
I will just reflect one of the comments. I think when we talked about the things that have been done about the events, I think Onik mentioned the One Caucasus Festival. I think they're doing a great job and should be emphasized. It's more difficult again to do it there. So this is just a note. But as Bright Garden Voices, we have expanded our activity into more one-to-one meetings, and then not only to physical meetings, but also different social media platforms as well. It used to be Zoom and then put on YouTube. Now it's Instagram as well. we're doing Instagram live chats with our guests. We will explore more options. We're looking into, we had a brainstorming the other day with our collaborators. First of all, the goal is to increase the number of the people that we work with and to delegate as much as possible, to decentralize our organization, and to empower people on the ground and everywhere in the world who are devoted to this issue. And motivated to do this reasonable things. That's our probably ultimate goal. But we are looking into the ways of reaching out to new generations. We actually, in this trio, they call me Boomer because I'm the oldest one among them. We have this inside joke, and I'm the one who's resisting to go to TikTok, but Diego is pushing for it. So we are looking into many platforms, many other platforms, including gaming as well. We have just explored that there is I think Chaykhana had this article about Azerbaijani. His name is Aghababa, and he's written about the idea of using peace in visual role play games which are so popular among the new generation. So those are the ideas where we're looking into. But the vision for the region is kind of we are realistic. We understand that we're just 1 year after the war. Both nations are healing, but we also see some tangible improvements, such as mutual statements on upper level about opening the corridors and communication lines. But we believe that even those things are being done, we should still understand and acknowledge the history, but to look at the history only from that perspective, not to use it as an argument in trolling or in arguing against, persuading the other side that we've been earlier than you are. The history should be looked at the only perspective that to understanding and to acknowledging your own mistakes and digesting it. So that's we completely understand that's a very painful and long process that the society should go through. Hopefully it will be supported from the top, but we will continue to do from bottom to up job that we have to do.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Also very happy to have everyone here. And thank you, everyone. I'm really proud of you guys, and hoping to see you again.
Thank you. Yeah, Caucasus Talks, Caucasus Crossroad. Yeah, please, just 2 sentences because we're.
I can shortly tell. Few of our moderator members come up with this idea of making like a page, because the group is private and we kind of don't want to bring too much toxicity to the group. So we are thinking to open a page called перекресток избранное. It's like Crossroads favorite, and to promote these ideas by that page, make it more popular, make their posts about like propaganda, like nationalism and stuff like that. Some reflecting posts, and also some interesting discussion from the group, of course, by covering like the names of who was writing their opinion, and just spreading it to the people. So maybe there will be more discussion and maybe a little bit toxic comments, but it will be more like an advertisement for the group.
Thank you. Leon, maybe do you want to say?
Yeah, just very quickly, I hope that we will broaden our range of activities. We're not just going to continue with just online discussions and writing articles in a kind of academic way. Hopefully we'll do things that are more accessible to the audience. For example, next project that we want to do with Togrul is about films, about comparing Armenian and Azerbaijani films from Soviet period until today, how they imagine each other through these films. I think something like that will be very accessible to people, relatable, and can also have a real impact.
Thank you so much. I want to conclude and just say that I'm so glad to know you guys, and I really hope we will be in touch as organizations and initiatives and personally, because and I believe that's the way we make each other stronger and we inspire each other to keep doing what we do. Because sometimes, especially escalations and the war, the recent war really hit us hard and really disempower us in what we do. So yeah, let's just you know, keep our connections, keep together, and continue our work. Please, again, I encourage our audience to follow Caucasus Talks, Caucasus Crossroad, or Kavказский перекресток, and Bright Garden Voices on social media. Engage in their discussions, watch their videos, and of course, in case of Caucasus Crossroad, you know, which is super interactive, just engage in the comments and discussions they're having there. Thank you again. I want to say that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So you can also follow Caucasus Edition to see the video and also get to know about our next webinars. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.